はい、皆さんこんにちは。 TBS クロスディグの竹下隆一郎です。クロスディグワンオンワン始まります。この番組は金融やビジネスの専門家と私がワンオンワンのインタビューをして最先端の知見をフレッシュなまま皆さんに産地直送でお届けする番組です。はい、そして今日はですね、オンラインでシンガポールとつないでまして、世界の三大投資家のジム・ロジャースさんとつながっています。最近ジムさん、日銀が日本を滅ぼすという本を書いて、ちょっと煽りすぎなタイトルな気がするんですけど、その真意はどこにあるのかと、特に日銀に対してどんなことを思っているのかということを聞いてみたいと思います。では早速ジムさんをお呼びしましょう。So, hi, Mr. Rogers, legendary investor, global financial expert, and author of your new book, 日銀が日本を滅ぼす. Welcome to our show.
I am delighted to be here. Japan's one of my favorite countries.
Thank you. So you're in Singapore right now.
I am in Singapore, yes.
The last time I interviewed, maybe 1 or 2 years ago, you said you like unagi. It's your favorite Japanese food. Do you still like unagi?
I love unagi.
You love unagi.
I would eat unagi every day if I could.
You should come to Japan and try the best unagi in Japan.
I know you do. I know you do. I know it's the best in the world.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'd like to talk about your new book, 日銀が日本を滅ぼす. So it's in English. It's The Bank of Japan Will Destroy Japan. I thought it's a quite provocative and shocking title. So what's the key message you wanted to deliver with your book, through your book?
Well, the Bank of Japan or Tokyo or somebody has been making mistakes for a long time. Interest rates in Japan were absurdly low since 1990. 34 years, and the Bank of Japan or somebody kept interest rates artificially low, and that has never been, I don't think that's ever been good for an economy. It causes distortions in the economic scenario, the way people invest, the way people think, and Japan has made a mistake. Tokyo, the Bank of Japan has made a mistake for many years.
But in 2024, they historically changed their monetary policy. What's the impression of the Bank of Japan in the year 2024?
Well, the Bank of Japan says that they're changing, that they understand what they need to do and to do right. We will see. You can ask me in 4 or 5 years. We'll see if they did it right.
True. So recently, the Bank of Japan decided to keep the interest rates unchanged. And they're citing that uncertainty over global economic factors, such as, the economic plans of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. So, what's your impression? What's your impression of the decision of the Bank of Japan?
Well, the Bank of Japan says that they understand and they're changing. Let's see. We will know in a few years whether they did it right or not. Japanese interest rates have been absurdly low for many, many years. And whether that's good for Japan or not, I don't think it's good for Japan. The Bank of Japan says I'm wrong. We will see.
So Governor Kazuo Ueda mentioned that he needs one notch more information to make his decision. So do you think there's a chance that the BOJ will hold off any major decisions until March? How might this impact the markets?
Well, I know that Japanese population has been declining for 14 or 15 years now. One of the reasons is because people they're not optimistic about the future. People don't have babies, and they're not optimistic. So whatever the reason, if you ask me, it's a mistake, and interest rates should be normal at international level or certainly a domestic level. And again, the Bank of Japan says I'm wrong. We will see. I do know that the Japanese population has been declining for a long time. That's usually not good for a country.
True.
And that's usually because somebody is not optimistic. Young people in Japan don't want to have babies.
So I'll ask about the population later in this interview, but first of all, I want to ask about the Fed decision. So they recently lowered its key interest rates for the third consecutive time. So can the Bank of Japan draw any lessons from the Fed?
Well, the Bank of Japan can learn from history, and they will see that artificially low interest rates have have never been good for any country in the long term. I can read the same history they can read, but they have a different view than I do. I know that something's wrong in Japan. Population is declining. Everything is declining. Yes, they're competitive right now a little bit, but that's historic. That's left over from the past. I mean, I want to tell you again, you cannot imagine how much I love Japan. So I hate to see this happen.
So what should Japan do?
Well, the radical answer would be to abolish the Bank of Japan and let the market set interest rates. The market is smarter than I am. The market is smarter than the Bank of Japan. So if Japan just let the market decide and set interest rates, they would be better off. It's unlikely the Bank of Japan will do that, but somebody should say, okay, let's look at the world, let's look at international interest rates, let's look at something, because we seem to be doing something wrong. I hope that they would come up with proper interest rates that would compete on the world level. I mean, if you look at interest rates in the rest of the world, they're much higher. They have been for a while. Japan has a declining population. Japan has problems and a gigantic debt building up. I would stop that if I were the Bank of Japan. The problem with that is it will cause some pain, and nobody wants pain.
Right.
I don't want pain. Nobody wants pain. So that would be the problem.
So what should Governor Kazuo Ueda do? So imagine if we were in his mind. What do you think he's thinking right now?
Well, I think he must be thinking that something has gone wrong in Japan. In recent days, weeks, the stock market has gone up to new highs after being depressed for 34 years, for over 3 decades. So somebody must now be realizing, oh, what's wrong? What did we do wrong? I hope that they're asking what went wrong and what they could do to make things better. I hope that's what they're doing.
Do you think the BOJ Governor Kazuo Ueda is doing a good job so far? Do you think he's understanding the issues or problems you mentioned?
Well, I don't know him, so I don't know. I don't speak Japanese, so I don't know. But I do know something seems to have changed. As you know, the stock market is going up now after over 30 years. So somebody thinks something is changing.
So, Jim, so I'm so happy you like Japan, you like unagi, but I was surprised and shocked that in your book you mentioned that you no longer own Japanese stocks. So could you elaborate on that? Why is that? What's the decision?
Well, I obviously sold too soon. The Japanese market went up a lot. I had owned it for a while, and it went up a lot, so I sold. I obviously sold too soon. I did not realize the extent of the change which may be happening in Japan. I am not happy I sold too soon, but obviously I did.
So let's talk about population. So you frequently talk about the decline of population in Japan. So what should the Japanese government, so who should solve the problem?
Well, Japan has tried giving incentives to families to have more babies.
Right.
For some reason, it's not working. If you ask me, that's because Japanese citizens know that there's something wrong. The debt keeps going higher and higher, and something's wrong. People would have more babies. I guess they can give more incentives for people to have babies. So far, that has not worked. Or they can allow more immigration. They have started allowing a few more immigrants, not very many in a country of 125 million people. But you only have 2 choices, have more babies or allow more immigrants. Otherwise, the population will continue to decline. And if you're a 15-year-old Japanese kid, you don't have a very good future. You have a bleak future. Because when you're 45, it may not be a Japan unless something changes.
So maybe one of our viewers are in their teenagers or 15 years old. What advice can you give to a Japanese teenager who's living in Japan right now?
Well, I repeat that I love Japan, but I would strongly urge all young Japanese to travel abroad some. It will teach you a lot about yourself, it will teach you a lot about the world, and it will teach you a lot about Japan. I would strongly urge Japanese youngsters to learn a second language. Most of them do, but I would certainly love for them to learn a second language, because then that will help them learn about the world. And if they learn about the world, they know more about Japan.
Some of the youngsters I interviewed actually mentioned that they want to escape Japan and maybe live in the United States or in Singapore. Do you think that's the right decision, especially the youngsters should take?
Well, I do think, to repeat, that all young Japanese should spend some time in other countries, a year or two or three, whatever it is. You can always go back to Japan. If you spend a couple of years outside of Japan, you will certainly learn a lot. You will learn about yourself, you will learn about the world, and you will learn more about Japan.
But they should. So it's not escaping Japan, but just traveling abroad and learning and coming back to Japan. And
that's what I suggest. But who knows? They might stay and they might never go back. I would think most of them would go back. Japan's a fabulous country, but who knows? But if they decide to stay away from Japan, it's because they have learned a lot about themselves and they've learned a lot about the world.
So let's talk about the U.S. economy. So when I look at the stats and what the Fed is saying, I think the U.S. economy is like the only strong economy in the world. What's your impression of the U.S. economy so far?
Well, the U.S. economy has been strong since 2009. That's the longest in American history without a serious problem. If you ask me, it's because too much loose money, too much money printing in the U.S. So I'm afraid the U.S. is probably coming to an end. I have sold my American shares. I've sold shares in many parts of the world. But I am worried about the fact that the U.S. is going to have a recession. We have always had recessions, and everybody's always had recessions, and the U.S. is overdue. If you ask me, the U.S. recession will probably come in 2025. But who knows? I don't know. Who knows?
How about like AI and Tesla? There's a lot of new companies, OpenAI, exciting companies. Do you think that's making the United States strong? What's your impression on that?
Well, AI, I mean, the world has always seen great technological changes, which have usually helped. I mean, the railroad came along, a huge change. Electricity came along. Radio came along. Many things came along, which helped change the world economy and the U.S. economy. It's happening again. AI is fabulous. AI is going to change everything we know. But to repeat, I mean, electricity changed everything we know, too. And AI will. Will it last forever? Well, perhaps. Electricity's lasted for a century. AI might, too. But will it save the world? Probably not.
So when I talk to CEOs in Japan, they're worrying about President Donald Trump. What do you think? Do you think we should be worried, or what's your impression of President-elect Donald Trump?
Well, everybody should worry about Donald Trump, including Donald Trump.
Okay.
But this has happened before in every country. You have a new administration. They make changes. Hopefully, they won't make mistakes. But everybody has made mistakes, including in America. So I'm afraid we will see new mistakes in Washington. And we should all worry. Mr. Trump should worry. But Mr. Trump doesn't worry. He thinks he knows everything.
How about Elon Musk?
Well, the same thing. Elon Musk thinks he knows everything, too. I don't know. He certainly made, on paper, has made a huge amount of money. So he probably knows more than Mr. Trump. But he may not know enough to save America. I don't think either of them can prevent America having an economic problem in the next year or two.
So let's go back to your book. So in your book, you mentioned that the Bank of Japan has a big role, and maybe this is another question I want to ask you. But so what advice can you give to the Bank of Japan for the year 2025?
Resign. Bring in a new group of people who understand economics and who understand that the artificially low interest rates in Japan for several decades is not good for the future of Japan. Population has been declining for a long time, so I hope they realize something is wrong, and they're not going to resign, but I hope that they will let the market decide interest rates instead of a few bureaucrats in Tokyo.
So you talked about population and immigrants. So a lot of people in Japan, it's a very controversial issue in Japan because when we see what's happening in Europe, and there's a kind of political divide when we talk about immigration and immigrants. So, but still, do you think that Japan needs to open up our country?
Well, I would. I mean, if you look around the world in history, look at the U.S. The U.S. became an extremely successful country because of a lot of immigration from all over the world. Yes, many people were against immigration, but it happened, and the U.S. became extremely successful. You look at countries that have closed off in history, they usually go into decline. The countries that are open to new ideas, new capital, new ways of doing things, have often led to success. So yes, I would certainly do whatever I could to encourage more immigration. You don't like foreigners for many historic reasons, but I hope that can change for the good of Japan and the good of the world.
Yes, definitely. So do you think that Japanese people are changing right now? Because right now in Japan, I can see a lot of entrepreneurs, CEOs, startups. I think there's a change happening in Japan. Do you feel that way?
I read the same thing you do, and you're closer to it than I am. So I hope it's changing. But you've got to do something for myself. If you don't do something, there's not going to be a Japan. The debt goes up every week. The population goes down every week. That is not a prescription for a good future.
So in your book, 日銀が日本を滅ぼす, you mentioned a lot about predictions. So looking ahead, what are your predictions for the Japanese economy and markets, as well as the international markets in the landscape in 2025? What are your predictions?
Well, the Japanese market has a lot of momentum right now. And usually when a market has momentum and starts going up, especially after being depressed for a long time, it usually lasts for a while. But if the world economy has problems, Japan will too. You're a huge trading nation, a great trading nation. But if your trading partners have problems, you're going to have problems too. And I do expect that the U.S. will have problems in the next year or two, and that means most people will have problems. And if many economies are having problems, it will hurt great trading nations like Japan.
So,
doesn't mean you did something wrong. It's just that the rest of the world has problems. So that will affect you.
So, Jim, I think we need to wrap up. Could you give some final comments or advice for our viewers who are mostly in the business sector? Any final comments?
Well, I would encourage all Japanese to learn about investing in other countries because Japan is great. The market is going through the roof now because of the Bank of Japan. But I would encourage all Japanese to learn about investing in other countries. The U.S. will have problems too, but they may be less bad than Japan's. I would just encourage all Japanese to learn about having money outside of Japan because there are great opportunities in other countries. So I hope that the Japanese will not continue to be so insular. I hope that they will learn about investing in other countries. There will be great opportunities, and it will help them invest in Japan too, if they know about investing in other countries.
Right. So in the year 2024, Japan started new NISA, and there are a lot of individual investors right now. So I think the Japanese people are learning to invest at this moment.
Well, I hope so. As I say, Japan is one of my favorite countries. So I hope that the Japanese start opening up a little bit and learning about the rest of the world. It'll be good for Japan, and it'll be great for the world if Japan opens up more.
Thanks. I'm just curious, Jim, so why do you like Japan so much other than there's delicious unagi?
Well, unagi's enough reason.
Okay.
But so Japan is, everything works in Japan. Japan is extraordinary. You know, everything goes right in Japan. And even if things are going wrong, they're not very wrong.
Okay, Jim Roger, thanks for joining our show, and congratulations on your new book, 日銀が日本を滅ぼす. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you. I hope we can do it again sometime because Japan's a great place.
Yes, see you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
はい、ということで本日のクロスディグワンオンワンは、ジム・ロジャースさんと一緒にお届けしました。これからもですね、この海外の有識者とかあと国内外の専門家のインタビューをどんどんお届けしますので、ぜひ YouTube のチャンネル登録クロスディグをよろしくお願いします。